Dear participants, welcome to the second day of the Community of Democracy's Youth Forum. I am Daria Oneshko, Program Officer on Gender Equality and Youth at the Permanent Secretariat of the Community of Democracies. We're so glad to be joined today again by youth networks, organizations, and young leaders from across the world. The CoD Youth Forum is organized by the Permanent Secretariat of the Community of Democracies, CoD Presidency Romania, and is championed by our CoD Youth Leads. CoD Youth Leads are young activists and democracy advocates from different countries and regions. Well, today we'll start with a discussion on the role of youth in advancing sustainable development goals, specifically in the region of Asia. Then we'll also have a Youth Leads conversation with Ambassador Simona Micholescu, Permanent Delegate of Romania to UNESCO, which will be led by our Youth Lead from Portugal, Rita Saez. And we'll proceed to a regional discussion on youth activism in Europe. And on this note, I'm really glad to pass the floor to our friend from the Asia Democracy Network, Su, who will be leading this session. Su, please, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Daria. Good day to all of you, and thank you for joining us to this Asia regional session called Youth Enabling the SDGs at the Local Level in Asia. As Daria said, my name is Sue. I'm the program manager at the Asia Democracy Network. And I want to thank CoD for having us to collaborate on holding this exciting session. The Asia regional session will feature speakers bringing regional perspectives regarding youth participation in the advancement of the Sustainable Development Goals. For the next hour, we will have a dynamic discussion regarding how young leaders from Japan, the Philippines, Nepal, India, and the Republic of Korea are innovatively working in their countries and communities towards the achievement of the SDGs. I will briefly introduce our panelists and then proceed to ask them 2 rounds of questions in which they will have 5 minutes each to answer. After that, I will then introduce our two respondents from the floor to give their thoughts and input on the presentations. For those of you in the audience, please send us your questions via the chat box in which the organizers will monitor, and any questions they will be sending to me to raise. So without further ado, let's begin. I'll go ahead and introduce our guest speakers. We have Ms. Lynrose Jane D. Ginon, Youth Lead from the Philippines. Lynrose is a member of the Executive Council of Young Women Leaders for Peace. She is also the co-director of Project Youth Amplifying, Co-Creating, and Advocating Peace, a youth leadership development program for peace, which envisions to build a network of young people in Mindanao with a view to nurturing a culture of peace. We have also Jagdish Kumar Iyer, from a youth lead from Nepal. Jagdish is a youth social activist from Daladura, a district in far western province of Nepal. Before being elected as president of the Association of Youth Organizations Nepal, Jagdish served as executive board member of AYON, where he provided leadership in various activities of the association. We also have Deepta Nahav, youth lead from India. Deepta has been working on creating safe spaces since 2013. She's the co-founder of Hackergram, a network based on social equity exchange that includes individuals, groups, and communities. And last but not least, my dear friend, we have Aoi Horiuchi, youth lead from Japan. Aoi is the senior advocacy officer at Japan NGO Center for International Cooperation, and mostly focuses work on the implementation of the SDGs, especially SDG 16. I welcome all of you and thank you for making time to enlighten us on your work. So I would like to remind our panelists to be mindful of the 5-minute time limit when you're responding, as we have a high-level segment right after this 60-minute session. So to go ahead and get started, I'll ask the first question that we would like to hear your responses to. As you are all actively engaged in civil society and activism advancing various sustainable development goals, what was your motivation to get involved in the first place? How did your story with SDG start, and why is your cause so important to you personally? I will ask Lynn Rose to go ahead and start. Lynn Rose, I give you the floor.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sue, and also hi to all my fellow panelists, and thank you for the space today. So with a question, for me, I'll start with saying that SDGs is not just our future, but it is our life. And I think that motivated me personally to maximize whatever platform I have to champion the goals. And having lived in a conflict-affected area and having experienced a violent conflict at a young age, I think the call to imagine a different future for yourself and for your community is more important than ever. I shared on another forum this week a line from Ocean Vuong, a Vietnamese American poet, saying, "Once war enters you, it never leaves, but merely echoes." I think, it will become part of you, but it is not you. It really is an experience that will help shape your life choices, but you are not defined by it. That horrible experience of needing to flee from home, living in evacuation sites, fearing another armed conflict, gunshots, friends being hostage, these horrifying images that I have witnessed directly and indirectly shape my advocacy. I remember my 13-year-old self wrote in an essay in a psychosocial session I've attended that there must be a different reality, free from violence, and we need to co-create that not just for myself, but for my community as well. And that was my introduction to peace building work. And I did not stop there. The more I engage in the community, the more I see that all social issues are interconnected. Maybe poverty, gender equality, climate change, peace and security, access to justice, human rights, to mention a few. This personal experience brought me to work for a culture of peace. I co-directed Youth Amplifying, Co-Creating and Advocating Peace, or Project Yakap, which is a youth-led program in response to Marawi siege in 2017. And this youth-led network created a leadership training, a capacity building program for young leaders in Mindanao, who then implemented peace projects in their communities. And my engagement in Project Yakap introduced me to Young Women Plus Leaders for Peace Philippines, a youth program of the Global Network of Women Peace Builders, which created a network of organizations led and initiated by young women and allies in the country. And I think the network aims to empower young women and allies to become peace builders in the Philippines, making youth peace and security agenda and women peace and security agenda a living document in the country. And we use various platforms, social media platform, and we organize for discussion and campaigns in line with this advocacy. And this network from a local to national gave me an opportunity to be part of the 16 by 16 initiative. And I'm happy to see Yagdish in this forum as well, which is also part of the 16 by 16 initiative of the UNDP Global Youth Program and COD's Youth Leads. And my participation in this global initiative and network of youth from across the globe championing the Sustainable Development Goals made me realize that my personal story is not remotely different from other young people's story. We share the same challenges and barriers, but we also share the same hopes and devoted to making our communities better, a better place to live in. Some have risked their career, some have faced risks of arrests, some have been victims of assault. And listening to them, I am made aware that these painful narratives do not want to be saved, pitied, or victimized. They want to be witnessed and heard. And this witnessing and hearing need to translate into concrete action. So through my engagements in the local, national, and global level, I am aware that when young women and men lives in conflict-affected and post-conflict communities and is confronting compounding vulnerabilities, they become more familiar to violence, conflict, and war than peace. And when youth experience violence, discrimination, and limited political inclusion, they can lose trust in the governance systems that are supposed to protect and support them. So apart from the organizations that I'm part of in my career, I also find a new space to advance my advocacy. At present, we implemented the SDG mainstreaming initiative in our university to build internal capacity and ownership of SDGs, especially to our students. So going back to the question to wrap up my intervention, Ms. Sue, is that, on why is this cause so important to me? And why am I using both formal and informal and non-formal platforms I need in advancing them? I think it is my way to help reimagine a better life and future for my community. And I think it is our moral duty, when you have the skills, the platform to amplify your voice and the voice of others, if you have social and leadership capital, it is our collective responsibility to do our part to co-create the space for our fellow young people to overcome the effects of these trauma caused by exposure to violence, loss, and separation during armed conflict, climate crisis, gender inequality, human rights violation, lack of access to quality education, and I can go on and on with all the challenges faced by young people. And creating spaces to share their experiences, to reclaim their agency and build resilience is very, very important. So each young person can resume a positive life trajectories and attain their fullest potential. So again, SDG is not just our future, but it is our life. So we must be, as young people, at the forefront in advancing them. So thank you so much, and I'll give the floor back to Sue.
Thank you so much, Lynn Rose. We will now go to Jagdish. Let's hear from Nepal on your view on this question.
Thank you, dear moderator, event organizer, my fellow content presenters, and dear participants. On behalf of Association of Youth Organization Nepal, I would like to pass my sincere hello and namaste, everyone. I also express my sincere condolence to all the global citizens who have lost their life to COVID-19 pandemic, and solidarity to all the youth who have lost their jobs and enterprise due to this pandemic. I would like to share my views with personal note regarding my motivation to get actively engaged in civil society and activism, advancing various sustainable development goals. During 1.5 decade back to the civil war between the state party and the Maoist rebels was at peak. My youth, many youth were engaged in the war. However, majority of the Nepali citizens were expecting peaceful dialogue between the parties. Back in my place, when I was only an adolescent fellow, I learned my families and struggled to promoting human rights and democracy, which brought peace and human rights sensitively. I was since I learned I was kidnapped by the Maoist rebels for 21 days, and then released without much physical harm. But the mental harm was irreparable. Since then, I was more committed to promoting peace and human rights. First of all, I established a youth club in my place when I was a young youth club. Now it was reputed as a local youth organization in the district level, that where I belong from the Daralda district. Has organized the youth and has been advocating for youth participation, for a peace and community development. Representing the very same organization, I am elected as chairperson of ION, which is the umbrella network of 94 youth organizations across our country. This is my short story. This is my story. This is my experience to how I am advocating to the for the sustainable development goals, peace, human rights. That's short story from my side. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Jagdish. Great. Now we'll go to our neighbor in India, Deepta. I'll give you the floor.
Thanks. So, hi everybody. Thank you so much for giving us this wonderful opportunity to come and talk about the region specifically. How did we start? We started when we at Hackergram we have lived immersive lives in communities rather than make interventions, and we realized that an immersive way of approach works in a way where you can approach youth from the perspective of holistic and integrated development. So we started creating spaces, and we saw that in most of the villages that we lived in, there was a time in the evening where the young would get together, and they would, at that point in time, in most of the communities that we worked in, it is not very internet friendly community. So there is a lot of time that the young people have that they want to use productively, but they don't really know what to do. So we started by creating spaces where young people would come and start talking. And if you could just moderate the conversation a little bit, you got some really insightful findings into their lives and their aspirations. And when we actually, when we continue to do the work, we realize that from Millennium Development Goals to Sustainable Development Goals, we hit almost, 13 to 14 of them, because we're not looking at one aspect of their lives. My personal motivation for this is I have been somebody who's not really been aware of what's going on, but it did hit me when my loved ones were hit, and I wanted to find out what was happening. And that's the case with most of the youths, right? So they have to find a personal story there. And when we want to include youth in governance, let's remember that in like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it is not a basic need. So somebody who's fighting for survival, not only from a materialistic point of view, but from a mental point of view, and post-pandemic, we've seen that even worse. All they require is a safe space where they can come and be themselves. And that initiates that abundance of time, that abundance of safety, makes them want to create something. And on the other hand, there are many institutions that have reached a level of failure, or they need some sort of revamping. That's where we work with youth, and we enable ourselves to make sure that we can question these systems as well, because creating safe spaces is not enough. You also have to constantly monitor, and it's an iterative process. So so I think this particular approach helps us understand every community's intrinsic issues much better. We understand, as Lynn-Rose said, that these goals are not goals, these are our lives, this is what we live with. And but often when you go into a community and start with a technical conversation, they're not interested. So once you have that immersive dialogue with the community, and then you say that, oh, you do these 3 things, do you know it falls under these goals, and then they immediately want to know more. So it's also how you engage the youth in finding it interesting and making it relevant for them. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's fascinating. Last but not least, Aoi, I'll hand you the floor to hear from what's happening in Japan.
Thank you, Sue. Hello, my name is Aoi Horiuchi. I'm a Senior Advocacy Officer of Japan NGO Center for International Corporations. So my personal story about engaging with SDGs is that the fact that I grew up in a highly unequal, corrupted, and unsustainable society, where the governmental sectors and private sectors is quite influential, while civil society groups have less opportunities. I was one of the CSOs who participated in the United Nations General Assembly in New York 6 years ago, 2015, when SDGs was adopted. Before adoption, Japanese civil society groups had a number of dialogues and exchanges with a delegation of Japanese government, mainly the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And at the beginning of the implementation stage, early 2016, people in Japan were not so familiar with SDGs. Only the government and civil societies were actively engaged. But since then, people came to know what the SDGs are all about, what we should do to achieve by 2030, mostly because of the government, mass media, and private companies' campaigns, including civil societies and youth. However, the current trend in implementing SDGs in Japan is somewhat old-fashioned to some extent. For example, promoting new technologies and innovations, bringing private money to international development, believing free market can solve all the problems, etc. In that sense, root causes of current unsustainable world is not considered, such as unequal distribution of wealth, violation of human rights, gender impartiality, climate crisis caused by human activities in especially economically developed countries like Japan. For example, the Japanese government postponed its national goal for women to account for at least 30% of leadership positions by 2020. At the end of this very target year, until as early as possible during the 2020s, so 10 years from now. The Japanese government is still constructing new coal power plants in Japan and also trying to export to Asian countries. That's why I'm involved in advocacy on SDGs, especially to realize fair and just society, where the process of decision making is transparent, information is open and accessible, and people can freely discuss government plans and activities and reflect their views. And I think it's crucial that youth is meaningfully engaged in this discussion. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ali. I mean, it's great to hear all your different perspectives and seeing how the youth, you're overcoming your challenges and using the SDG to kind of push the advocacy and the cause. And it's very fascinating to hear. So I'll go ahead and move on to the next question then, which is, so as youth experienced and continue to experience disproportionate impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, how, in your opinion, are the governments, international organizations, civil society, private sector, and other stakeholders, how can they help youth in your activism, as well as keep the focus on SDG implementation during the current COVID-19 process or crisis? Let's see. I'll go start with Lynn Rose again in the same order. Lynn Rose, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you so much, Sue. And I really agree to the points raised by my fellow panelists earlier. And when we talk about COVID-19, to paint the picture of how it has affected, I remember, like my literature inclination I remember Arundhati Roy saying, and to borrow her words, like the pandemic made the mighty kneel and brought the world to a halt like nothing else could. Our minds are still racing back and forth, longing for a return to normality, trying to stitch our future to our past and refusing to acknowledge the rupture. But the rupture exists. And I think in the midst of this terrible despair, it offers us a chance to rethink the doomsday machine we have built for ourselves. And we are left with two choices. One, we can choose to walk through it, just go business as usual, with our dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us, or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. So I think, we need to choose the latter if we look into those words of Arundhati Roy. This crisis is an opportunity to imagine our community anew. And this global tragedy is immediate, it's real, it's epic, and it's unfolding before our eyes. But it isn't new in so many aspects. COVID has revealed the economic, social, and developmental fragilities and the deep fault lines of our society. And we can see, and we have seen, I think, across the region, how it disproportionately affects vulnerable groups, including young people, most especially with the communities that we work with, young women and girls. So I think we need to work together in ensuring inclusive, gender-sensitive, family-centered, non-violent, and environmentally sustainable response to COVID-19 pandemic to ensure that the vulnerable sectors are not left behind, and also to make sure that we need to reach the further behind first. So on the question on how different stakeholders can help young people in their activism, as well as to keep focus on the SDG implementation during this pandemic, I think my suggestion is we need youth lead. And for me, this means letter L stands for leadership. We need to encourage and support and create an enabling environment for young people in leadership roles. I think it is crucial that governments make sustained commitments to rebuild young people's trust and confidence in governments. with the lack of effective and efficient government response to the pandemic, like in the Philippines, we have seen young people at the front line. And I think this leadership of young people needs to be recognized, invested in, and amplified. I mentioned youth lead, and the next is education. That's letter E. And my fellow panelists mentioned earlier, now we need to bring SDGs home, make it more relatable to young people. So I think we need to educate and capacitate local young peace builders. Working in the academe as well, I strongly believe that strong, good, and quality education that reaches marginalized sector, is one way, that we can truly recognize young people's critical role as agents of change for sustainable development and peace. The third one is letter A, access to opportunities. And I think we need to ensure access to meaningful opportunities for young people by investing in local actors and enhancing local capacities to be more resilient to different global challenges such as COVID, poverty, climate change, etc. We also need to provide access to safe platform for young women and allies to speak up, volunteer, and contribute. Especially democracies around the globe are under attack, and to mention one in the Philippines. And the last one, D, is digital inclusion. We must ensure that young people have access to and are able to properly use technologies required to engage in modern society. And we must address the digital divide squarely. And I think, to be able to harness the power of technology, we need to partner, like with and support economic empowerment initiatives led and initiated by young people, including youth innovation. And I think this can be accomplished by forming meaningful partnership. And when I talk about partnership, I'm talking about collaborative effort between young and adults that is inclusive, purposeful, and mutually respectful. Again, to help youth in their activism, as well as to keep the focus on SDGs implementation during the pandemic, we need youth leadership, education, access to opportunities, and digital inclusion. So those are my thoughts on the question. Thank you so much, Sue, and I'll give the floor back to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Jagdish, I'll give you the floor next.
Sure. Thank you, dear moderator, for the questions. It's very true that youth have been experiencing disparate impact of the COVID-19 pandemic in attaining their education, employment, engagement in the social political engagement. In the given unfavorable context, my opinion for advancing SDG implementation in the partnership with government, international organization, civil society, private sector, and other stakeholders are. I'm going to highlighting how the government should, or how the other related agencies should. First of all, the government should introduce a relief package for youth so that they can start up their business activities, activism initiative. And second one important thing is that government should free skill building opportunities and startup support those have lost their jobs due to the pandemic. And most important one thing is that engage youth in local level planning, budgeting, implementing, and monitoring and evaluation process, where the most of the youth are lacking in the local level planning processes. That one thing is the important things to government should do. Similarly, many of the international organizations should have introduction project lead youth, those who advance SDGs, to focus on the more SDG related activities, advocate and facilitate the respective governments to prioritize youth responsive planning and budgeting. They should have to support the youth responsive planning and budgeting. And an important one thing that is that create avenues of active engagement for youth to advance SDGs. Create one of that avenues to active engagement for the youth to advance the SDGs. Likewise, the role that civil society should have, prepare a sustainable development goal, wise intervention and activities module, and purpose their module to respective agencies. And other things that hold regular discussion, interactions, and advocacy session on SDG with the concerned stakeholders. One other thing that most of civil society, then they can engage more youth more youth engage their activities. And finally, private sector and stakeholders should. That's very important to support private. One of the key agency, private sector, that should be help preparing sustainable business plans. Those advance in the achieving SDGs indicators. As a part of corporate social responsibilities, the private sector should allocate youth responsive budget programs and create conical atmosphere for the youth who have been badly impacted by the COVID pandemic. These are the things measure, in my opinion, I have been highlighted here. Thank you very much for your attention to and listening to me here. If any question, I'll be back to you in the floor. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jagdish. We'll go to Deepta.
Yeah, so this is actually a question that we've dealt with quite a bit. So I have a few points. A lot of what has been said so far, I completely agree with them, and I'm just going to kind of build on that. So from the government perspective, I think considering that a lot of migration has happened and youth has gone back to their, their cities where they actually migrated because there were no employee, models there. I think government should look at empowering entrepreneurship models where the youth can get some kind of a subsidy or some kind of, mentoring that can help. The other thing is considering, in COVID, we saw that there were a lot of apps and there was a lot of technology that was built wherein consent was kind of not very well managed. So I think one of the things that the government should look at is consent in terms of data protection and privacy of the youth, especially for people who are doing human rights work and, they need to get vaccinated. So these are some of the things that I think government should look at. I think also in terms of donors, I would say that they should really look at some sort of innovative funding models because there are many, community-based organizations. There are many youth informal groups that have come up that have done a lot of work. So they should be able to get that help and they shouldn't be denied that because they're not a registered organization. So donors should really be able to look into that as an issue and see if they can do something about it. There are a lot of donors who are looking into it, but I think post-COVID, it needs to be done quite actively. In terms of, in my experience, I had a lot of, friends and colleagues who were from the LGBTQI community and who had to face a lot of issues during the pandemic because they were not out to their parents, and in terms of their mental health, issues, there were problem, and of course there was work. So I think corporates should definitely look at making more employee-friendly policies where these kind of things should be considered, and there should be something around mental health where, now that people can work from home, if there is something that they can look into and, create that kind of an enabling environment for their own employees. The other thing in terms of corporates, I would say that in India, for example, we have seen that the corporate social responsibility is a must for companies. Now, what happens with CSR mostly is that it is usually a very limited funding, firstly, and secondly, it's very, directed either where their factories are or where they're, so there's the impact that they're creating can be so much more if they can diversify their, portfolios that they support. And in terms of community-based organizations, I think that they have been the champions in the pandemic. And some of the points that they, that we have been interacting with them that they said is, one is there was a lot of resource dumping that was seen in pandemic. And there was no real training on how to use those resources. So we saw a lot of villages where, they had a lot of resources, but people still didn't know what to do because nobody could travel there. So, these kind of community-owned technologies, community-owned communication networks should come up where at least one village can talk to the other, even if there is no internet. And, and these kind of ideas can only come from community-based organizations, and this is something we do and we find it very helpful. And that is if you co-create with your community. If you have a program that you want to run in your community, please do not assume that it's going to work because you think, it will work. So if we collab, and in our experience, whenever we have collaborated with the community, which we do every time, we've gotten some really great insights. And it also gives a sense of ownership to the community where they feel that it's their own thing and not something somebody is telling them to do. So I think these are some of the points that I wanted to share. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much. And then Aoi, I'll hand you the floor.
Thank you. Yes, first of all, I think the government should protect lives and health of youth during the COVID-19 pandemic and ensure that they can continue to study at schools and universities, as well as safe environment for those who are working, and prevent them from leaving schools and workplaces by providing sufficient financial support. At the same time, those stakeholders, including governments, private sectors, and civil society, can support youth by listening to their opinions and their priorities and reflect them into their activities. Recently, I read the news about there are many Japanese young people who are giving cares for their families, like parents or their brothers and sisters, and they're quite busy for the care, so it was very difficult for them to work or study at schools and university, and there's not sufficient public support. I think we should change the situations. And with regard to the educations, currently the Japanese government have stopped issuing visas for most of exchange students coming outside of Japan. This is actually exceptional, as other G7 countries do accept exchange students, and this will force many exchange students to miss the opportunity to study. There are also obstacles for young students, especially university students, with regards to job hunting. Due to COVID-19 spread, young people need to have online interviews with private companies to seek jobs. But it is reported that many university students are sexually harassed by companies' senior staffs who are in charge of recruiting. One female university student created a video to educate students to refrain from being harassed. This seems to be a good initiative, but it is companies' responsibility not to sexually harass students who attend job interviews. Second thing that stakeholders can do to help youth activism is that giving powers, opportunities, and responsibilities to younger people. I mean, the current society in Japan is highly male dominant and elderly dominant, so that youth, especially young girls and women, have less opportunity to raise voices and to be heard. I think existing organizations, including civil society, should give up their privileged positions and provide more opportunity to future generations in order to fully achieve SDGs during the COVID-19 pandemic, as the youth hold the future. Thank you.
Great, thank you for those fascinating suggestions and ideas. And the common thing that I hear is, we really need to amplify youth voices and, bring you into, really listen to the youth. And I think it's also very important to, provide that space to have youth actually take part in the decision-making process. Why in parliament, in government, even in our civil society organizations, not that we're just just busy worker bees, but also be in one of those decision-making positions as well. And I think that's very important. If we really truly want to incorporate youth voices, we need to give them space alongside us, not, just only cultivating and, capacity build to bring them up, but bring them next to us to kind of work with us in making these decisions for change. Great, thank you so much. We have now we're going to hear from two respondents and to kind of have them give us their intervention about the importance of youth activism for SDGs and democracy. So we'll hear two short presentations. We have Ms. Haemin Park. She's the president of New Ways, an organization in the Republic of Korea, which is an agency that supports the development of young politicians under the age of 40. And especially ahead of next year's local elections in Korea, we're making, New Ways is making efforts to increase the number of local politicians being elected. So without further ado, Ms. Haemin, I will go ahead and give you the floor.
Thank you, Sue. And I share my presentation material. Okay. So first, I listen carefully to the panel's stories and opinion. I listen any perspective and insights. Actually, this is first time of introducing New Ways experiments globally. So I'm so excited. I think that the key part of helping SDGs to achieve is ensuring that people have the power to make decisions. So New Ways is trying to make decision maker. I introduce New Ways in experiments. So before that, I explain Korean environment in the Republic of Korea. There are a significantly low number of young politicians. In local councils, only 6% of the total number are under the age of and in the Nation Assembly, the number is only 4.3% of the total. The problem is there is no system which helps young politicians to grow and gain power. Therefore, the vicious cycle of relying on the powerful to get opportunities is repeated. So New Ways is a nonprofit organization that started in February this year to help empower young politicians under the age of 40. We are growing a foundation which connects young politicians and interested citizens, voters, who we call casting managers. So this is our universe in the foundations. So currently in US, we have 180 young candidates preparing for next year's election, regardless of parties. And there are more than 3,700 casting managers nationwide. US has an agreement with a total of 7 political parties, including the main opposition party. This agreement will help to connect young politicians to these parties. And communication and community experiments are also being conducted so that citizens can understand why changes are needed. New Ways sends email which easily explain political content like this, and these emails come in the form of study books. We also organize and publish interviews with young local politicians like this. And we held an online campaign for expanding the chances of young politicians. We also run meeting where casting manager can meet young local politicians like this in online. Through our work, we hope that citizens will be able to feel politically empowered, that young politicians will be able to increase their influence and ultimately go into better decision maker. That's our vision and mission. So thank you for taking the time to listen our experiment. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. That was fascinating. And it would be great to kind of get everyone else's input on Heyman's presentation. Our next presentation, we have Mr. Kyle Christian Concepcion. He's from the Philippines, a volunteer of the SDG Mainstreaming Initiative, and the name of the in the University of Mindanao State University. Kyle, are you here and are you ready to speak?
Yes, ma'am. First. So, hey everyone, it has been a very overwhelming and at the same time informative discussion about SDG talks, and I personally have learned so many new and fresh perspectives from the narrative that the panelists have shared. As a volunteer, the narratives have resonated so much to me as it expands the idea of how someone can do great things through small steps and through continuous initiatives. As per definition, Sustainable Development Goal, or SDG, were adopted by the United Nations in 2015 as a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that by 2030, all people enjoy peace and prosperity. I really love the suggestion of how youth can do something, can make change, can amend something, creating a space for the youth for discussion and communication. As per experience, it would be great if there'll be more youth who can speak their minds out about the SDG and how important it is. Using the social media as the platform to raise awareness, conduct seminars, talks, and conferences to amplify the voice of the initiators about the matter is somehow a great way to is a great way, most especially during this pandemic. And with all of our initiatives, with all of our talks that we have conducted, we have seen that there are more youth who would like to engage themselves towards these initiatives. And I guess that is a very great and a positive feedback for us as the initiators. So yeah, thank you so much for listening.
Great, thank you. I mean, all of you are so great with time, and we have now ample amounts of time to have further discussions. So thank you for that. For those in our audience and joining us online, please, do not hesitate to throw questions for our panelists and speakers here so that we could continue. We have a little bit of time, and I want to kind of extend this discussion. And it was just fascinating to hear about all your work and how innovatively you guys are, trying to advocate your causes using the SDG framework to better create a space. And I want to throw another question in to kind of get everyone, even the respondents' input. Let's see here. I mean, what is your advice to other young people who wants to become involved in promoting and advancing the SDGs and democracy, but who are not certain on where to start? And it just would be great to kind of get your opinion on suggestions on how people could be more involved in work that you guys are doing. Who should I start from? Maybe I'll go backwards from our panelists. Awi, may we start with you and then we'll go backwards.
Okay, thanks for the another questions. Let me introduce one song by a world famous Bon Jovi, which is called Do What You Can. Bon Jovi actually released a new album last year, and there's a song called Do What You Can, and it says, if you can do what you do what you can. I think this is a good, very good advice for all the young people. If you cannot do what you can do, if you cannot do what you do, you should do what you can do. So you can do, you can learn what SDGs is, and you can solve what you think that should be solved. And that's, I think, the starting point from all the things by youth activism. And for me, I think advocating SDGs is what I should do and what I can do. So I personally do it, and also as organizational work, I do for advocacy works. So this is my one advice to my fellow activists.
Fantastic. So even just having the interest, that is a one big step forward. Yes, great. Thank you. Let's see who before we have Deepta. Yes, I'll give you the floor.
So this may sound really boring, but I would say that if you read the SDG goals, this is how we should live our life in general. If you're a conscious person, if you are thoughtful towards other people, I think you will hit most of the goals, right? Because you respect people with, no matter where they come from, what their gender is, you're hitting the gender equality goal in some way, aren't you? So if you are, if you're carrying a lot of plastic around, stop doing that. So these are very basic things that we are calling trends, or we are saying, this is a new thing that people are doing. If you look at any of these, lifestyle altering behaviors, they're in some way impacting something else, so it's actually a network. So if you can just start from there, you're already doing something. And there will come a story that will move you, and that will tell you that this is where you want to specifically work in. But if you don't have that agenda, and this is something I tell a lot of young people, old people, but mostly young people, because I think there is so much hope, there is so much honesty, there is so much desire and ambition, right? So I think I would definitely say that just be a little more thoughtful, and that's a good start. And if you see another person being as thoughtful as you are, strike a conversation with them and you will get somewhere really nice. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say.
Fantastic. Right. I'm hearing this trend, calling for the youth to take a little bit more interest in issues and whatnot. Let's see. Jagdish, I will give you the floor.
My one suggestion to my youth fellows is to keep advocating, when you are you are in village or rural area or everything in the where you stay, you keep advocating, and also to take a leadership. Our ward is facing by the youth leadership in the parliamentarian. Only 2% in the ward is under 30s. So we have to take a leadership now with youth every from the world. We have to ready for leadership in every sector for the meaningful participation. So my all fellows, keep advocating and keep to take ready for leadership. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Lynn Rose, I'll give you the floor. Oh, Lynn Rose, I think you're on mute. Or
Hello.
oh yes, we can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. So I think for me, start with who you are. What are the things that you value, and what are your strengths, and what are your weaknesses? So I think that's because we come from different backgrounds and we have different capacities. And I tell you, if you look at the 17 goals, there's a place for whatever we value there. So if you value the environment, if you value humanity, and there are goals that would fit into that, as mentioned by Tita earlier. And second, I think is look into what you know, so that things will not be overwhelming. If you're a student, if you're a teacher, if you are social activist, if you are from different backgrounds. So what's your education? What are you good at? And also tap on your personal experience. And I think third is look into what you do, so that advancing SDG will not be a different thing. For example, I'm a teacher in a university, so I integrate it in my work as well. And also I run a youth-led organization, so I integrate it as a framework of what we do, so that it will not overburden you with all the things that we are doing. And I think the fourth one I would say is that look into who you know. And I think it's fun. I'm happy to see Kyle here in the platform, because Kyle, I've worked with Kyle as a student. He is one of our student volunteers in the SDG Mainstreaming Initiative, MMSUIIT. And look at your network. Could be your friends, it could be your office mates that could help you in advancing, like the SDG goals. So for me, start with who you are, what you know, what you do, and who you know. So I think those are the 4 things that I could share on that question.
Thank you. You know what just came to mind now, last week with BTS being at the UN SDG event, I think some of you might get busy with a lot of youth taking interest and wanting to join your initiatives. Hemin, I would also want to give you the opportunity to respond to the question on if you have any advice for young people on if they're interested in getting involved. I'll give you the floor.
Okay. From the perspective of democratic activists, I would say that it's important to select the expression to connect between people and society. Language is important as an activist, so I want to tell them not to give up on speaking that connects context, information, and opinions. I think this is the first step to make the change people and society. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. Making sure to raise your voice and making known of your thoughts and opinions. And then Kyle, I will also give you the opportunity to respond to that question.
I guess the only thing I think I could share is that we need to do change and establish our advocacies. Because if we don't know what our advocacy is, we don't know what to perform, what to prioritize. And advocacy, by definition, is an action that speaks in favor of or recommends, argues for a cause, supports or defends or pleads on behalf of others, which is somehow interconnected with each and everybody. I mean, society and us, the environment and us, we are all interconnected with each other. So if we don't do something for today, we will be the ones who will suffer for tomorrow and for the next generation. So I guess if we can make change as soon as possible today, establish our advocacies, we can create a better and bigger world for the next generations to prosper. I guess that's all.
Fantastic, thank you. So we have 10 more minutes left. That's a lot of time. And I'm seeing that there are no questions in the chat. So please, if anyone has questions, please feel free. I'm wondering if anyone in the panelists, you've heard our colleagues here talk about their initiatives and their thoughts. Does anyone have any questions for our other panelists here? Give a few minutes. Or let's see. Or I'm fascinated to see about bringing, Hemin's presentation about bringing more young people into the political process. And I'm wondering how that is in other countries. There's this initiative. Is it easy in places like Japan, Nepal, India, and the Philippines for young people to have a spot in parliament or take part in that political process? Lynn Rose.
Sorry, I missed that, the last part, if you may. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, not at all. It was just a random question. I mean, I was thinking how is the, political, how easy is it for young people, youth, to get involved in the political process in your respective countries? Let's say if I want to go and run for, to be a parliamentarian, are there opportunities?
Yeah, in the case of the Philippines, actually, we have this youth council. So there is we call it Sangguniang Kabataan in the Philippines. So it's an elected position. So it's a youth representative, an elected office. So I would say that structurally speaking, there's a space for young people. And also we have the National Youth Commission. So it's a national commission that really looks into the needs and addresses the needs of young people in a national scale. So in the local to national scale, there are structural platforms where young people, where it's friendly, where there's a space for young people. But I think the challenge there is, ensuring that these space, will be accessed by young people who are not, all young people, I mean, even if you're not well connected politically, can have access to the space. Because if you run for office, you would be needing for resources and in how politics would run, endorsement. If there's one young people that's not well networked and not well connected to to existing politicians, he or she will have a lesser chance compared to let's say somebody who's a daughter or a son of a mayor, for instance. So I think making sure that all young people from different backgrounds and making access to these kinds of spaces gender equal, I think that's where the challenge is. But structurally speaking, I would say that the Philippines in the local and the national level has structures that provide space for young people. But I think the advocacy or work needs to be done, making sure that different the heterogeneous representation of young people in the spaces. I think it's more on that. The advocacy should be more focused on that. So
great. Thank you, Lynn Rose. I'm sorry to put you on that spot. I mean, that was a great response. I mean, we also just got a very good question from the Secretary General of the Community of Democracies, and I want to make sure we give that question to you all, because I think that's very important. The Secretary General asked, how can the Community of Democracy support youth generally and in your efforts to advance the SDGs? He's very interested in learning more on how the CoD could help you in your work. So briefly, because I think we're going to go ahead and start the next session, if everyone, if we could have go around, maybe take a minute or two just to respond to that question. This time I'll start backwards from Aoi. If I could have you respond to that.
Yes, thanks for the questions from the Secretary General of CoD. I think that CoD can help youth that they require the membership countries of CoD to report the discussions between the government and the youth, especially promoting democracy and human rights. So that if you condition on that conditions, each member of CoD will promote the discussion with the youth.
Fantastic. Thank you. And then Deepta?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I think it's quite a pertinent one. I think one of the things that I would be looking at, and one of the reasons that I find this community such an integral part of what I do, and that's that there are often times that, this is the time that we would be wanting youth, like I would talk from the India perspective, we would really want a lot of conversation happening between the state and the youth. And as the CoD India co-youth lead and the experience that we have, we would like to initiate those conversations to make sure that those dialogues are happening. So from CoD, my request would be to get all the support that we can to make sure that it fits the template that they would like it to be in. And from our side, get those, documentation and the support as we need so that we can get those dialogues initiated. And I think that's one of the big things that CoD can give us as the youth colleagues.
Fantastic. Thank you. Jagdish?
Thank you again. For in the context of Nepal, we have a good population of youth, more than 40%, 40.5% of youth, total population of the youths. So as Lino said, that we have a good structural wise, we have good policies in youth. We have Ministry of Youth and Sports, National Youth Council. We have Provincial Youth Council also as well. Some of the local level create also local youth council as well. Yes, and we are running in the federal structure, but some of the new policies have been implemented in the local level also. Local level. So main thing is that we have policy, we have structure, but main thing is that the implementation, how is going through the implementations, how youth are beneficiary from that, the policies, how there is the political engagement of the youths. So every youth should have in the meaningful participation in the structure wise, like as in the national council, like as in the local bodies, there should be the meaningful participation of the youth. So that's the beauty of the democracy, how the youth engage the youth in the meaningful is in the decision making level. Another thing is that our main youth flow has to in the youth has in the migration. Most of youth have searching for jobs in the Arabian countries like open boundaries to challenge a great job in the countries, our own countries. So our government or internal agency should focus on the create of jobs in the self countries and to engage them in the to create a job in their own countries. So this is the situation of our countries in the Nepal. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Lynn Rose?
For me, it's more on from presence to influence, making sure that these narratives of local actors and from different parts of the world, tapping into the collective power and the influence of networks such as youth leads. I think like the community of democracy has a huge role and has the capacity to make sure that our narratives, the things, our experiences, has influence to policy making, and also as what my fellow panelists have mentioned, the importance of space and making sure that in all formal, because most of young people are active in the grassroots, but they disappear when it in the higher level conversation. So we need to provide that space and ensure that that space has an influence to policy, and at the same time also monitoring and follow up on how countries, member states, for instance, are delivering to what they've committed in conversations like this. Because at the end of the day, we may gather a number of dialogues, and if nothing happens and nothing changes in the ground, then also that is our commitment to the community that we're serving, that making sure that it goes back to the local communities, because we're participating in conversations like this, making sure that our local narratives influences, policy making, so that there will be not just local change, but systemic change. So I think platforms like this and networks such as Youth Leads has a huge power in making that happen. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lynn Rose. Unfortunately, we have the next session happening and we're over time. I want to thank all of you here to give us your input and your fascinating presentations. And I hope everyone the best and stay strong during this pandemic still. And I will now give back the mic to Daria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue, for moderating. Thank you to our youth leads for your insights regarding how you all advance sustainable development goals in different areas, really, at local level, also at national level. And thank you also to the Asia Democracy Network for partnering for this session. It's been a wonderful discussion. And right now, we will be moving towards our next segment. It is a Youth Leads conversation with Ambassador Simona Mirela Micholescu, who is a permanent delegate of Romania to UNESCO. And the session will be hosted by Rita Saez, our CoD Youth Lead from Portugal. Rita right now is a consultant on youth and intergenerational dialogue at Presidency of the Portuguese Republic. And prior to this position, Rita was the chair of the Portuguese National Youth Council. Rita and Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us today. Rita, over to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning to everyone. As Daria was saying, I'm Rita, I'm a CoD Youth lead, and I have the pleasure to introduce you a brief conversation with Ambassador Simona Mirela Micholescu, the permanent delegate of Romania to UNESCO that was kind enough to accept our invitation. Good morning, Ambassador. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure it will be a very lively conversation. So let me first introduce you what we can expect from this conversation. It will be a 25 minutes panel on the success story of the ambassador as a senior diplomat. We often forget that politics are made of people, as we were discussing just in the previous panel, and how important the stories of those behind politics influence the course of action. So we'll take the next 25 minutes to get to know the ambassador a little bit better, the struggles, but also what kept the ambassador going and led her to become a senior diplomat. And of course, we are among young people, so we are keen also to know what strategies did the ambassador use to include youth in her work now at UNESCO and previously at UN office in Belgrade. So let me briefly as well, because the curriculum is very long, the ambassador Simone Mirela Micholescu. She's a senior Romanian diplomat currently serving as the permanent delegate of Romania to UNESCO with the rank of ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary. Prior to this, ambassador served as representative of the UN Secretary General and head of the UN office in Belgrade up to or since July 2015. Prior, she was the permanent representative of Romania to the UN between 2008 and 2015. And during her 24 years of diplomatic career, she has served in different governmental roles, from spokesperson of the Romanian Ministry of Government Affairs to press secretary of the Romanian embassy in Washington, D.C., to senior public information officer at the mission of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe in Kosovo, among many, many other roles. Between 2000 and 2004, ambassador served as the foreign policy advisor to the president of Romania, becoming the first woman in the Romanian diplomatic history to be granted the rank of the ambassador. Simona Mirela Micholescu has also an academic background as well as an extensive experience in public communication, starting with her PhD in literature, her academic career as a professor of international public relations at 2 Romanian universities and as publisher of several books and tons of articles, went in parallel with the evolution of her diplomatic career. In Romania, she is known as one of the best experts of the area of the management of international public relations and developed the first curricula on this topic, which has been now used in several Romanian universities. And just to finish off, during her term in New York, ambassador held several positions, including vice president at the UN UNICEF Executive Board, vice president of the Assembly of States Party to the Rome Statutes of the International Criminal Court, vice president of the Bureau of the Francophonie, chair of the Special Political and Decolonization Committee of the General Assembly during its 66th session, vice president of the UN General Assembly for its 68th session, and chair of the 53rd session of the UN Commission for Social Development. So as you can see, youth leads, we are having a very important person with us today, and we are very excited to hear about the ambassador experience. So Ambassador, thank you once again for joining us today and take the time to be here. And I would like to start by asking what was your motivation to join the Romanian diplomatic service, and how and when did you understood that public service was your mission or your passion, can I say?
Bonjour de Paris. Thank you, Rita. It was a very long presentation having in view the very short time that we have at our disposal, I will respond to your question, but let me first thank Secretary General Thomas Garrett and his team for making this possible, and to say how proud I am of the second term of the chairmanship of Romania of the Community of Democracies, and of course, greet my colleagues from the Foreign Ministry. And by the way, Rita, I could spend a few minutes also with your bio. I was very impressed by your bio too. Apparently, sky is the limit for you. So, well, first of all, I think I had a strong fascination with the world, perhaps because for a long time in the communist Romania of my youth, a long time ago, we were deprived access to the world and to all its wonders. We weren't allowed to study abroad. We weren't allowed to travel abroad. So I was indeed fascinated with the world and with international relations. But I believe it all truly comes, as I think it does in the case of all diplomats, I think. It comes from my deep love for Romania, from my frame of reference, my upbringing, my education, and my heart. For me, Romania means everything. I'm a little Cancer for whom family and the country is everything, and home. And representing my country is the best and most beautiful career possible, a path that has determined me to give up a high position at the UN, from where I was speaking you last year, after 5 years, because I longed to represent Romania. It was a real honor to represent 193 countries, but after an inventory of all the joys of my professional career, which, by the way, spans actually 30 years by now in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I realized that I was the happiest when I represented Romania. So that's why I'm here. This is how everything happened for me to be here. So it starts with loving your country. And this is the engine that drives a diplomat, that it is like a perpetuum mobile, you know, that vibrates in your heart and in your mind at all times. As far as challenges are concerned, I have to check the time because I'm not sure I can tell you in a few minutes, but it's a good test for a diplomat who are famous for speaking a lot. Well, of course, I have to scan back more than 30 years in a career, which is by its definition, actually, a complex challenge, a perpetual challenge. It is not only a professional challenge, it's also a personal challenge because of the sacrifices that it involves. Just one example, I'm here alone in Paris without my family, longing for my family. But I have to do it because, you know, this is how I can provide in this moment. Well, each phase of my career had complex and specific challenges that grew in complexity as I went up the hierarchy. The higher you are, the more challenges you have. And Rita, one mention, please interrupt me because I might not be able to stop, okay? Please feel free to interrupt, okay? So, I don't know, maybe when I became the first ever woman spokesperson of the Foreign Ministry in 1993, my professional journey was just beginning. Back then, public relations and institutional communication were ground zero. And it was challenging to actually create the structure of the ministry's communication. I was tested daily. The spokesperson's institution in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was very new. The diplomats were not used to it. They had worked for years under the cloak of confidentiality and discretion without an active public communication. There was only propaganda before that. So a woman spokesperson was a huge step for the ministry. And I look back with amusement, but at the time I was really stressed about it. So that was one chapter in my life. I remember fondly that time, even if it was so challenging. Then when I became the first ever Eastern European in a senior position at the OSCE mission in Kosovo in 1999, immediately after the war, there were a lot of professional challenges because, for instance, just like in Romania, public relations and communication were at the beginning, and I was leading the mission's public information department. So these trials in the profession were doubled by personal security challenges because it was an absolute chaos after the war, and there were still a lot of armed attacks. Well, while I was foreign policy advisor to the president, well, each day was a challenge. I had the tough duty of managing the diplomatic agenda of the head of state, a position of high responsibility, complexity, and difficulty, I might say. I had to coordinate absolutely all the meetings and official visits in the country and abroad, as well as the numerous visits of foreign heads of states, presidents, kings, queens in Romania. So it was challenging, but again, I loved every minute. Afterwards, when I became ambassador to the UN, the financial crisis broke. And in Romania, there were... Oh, no more timing? Okay, I will stop here.
No, I said perfect timing for you to become the ambassador of the UN.
Yeah, exactly. Because they knew I love challenges. So I had zero budget as an ambassador to the UN in New York, where everybody invests millions in the image of their country. So not having a budget was quite a challenge, but well, I managed. I had to prove that I deserved to be the first ever woman to run Romania's permanent mission to the UN, as I'm here now in 65 years, the first woman to lead the permanent delegation of Romania to UNESCO. Well, that was it. Okay, I will try to stop with Iraq, where the security situation when I worked there between 2006 and 2007 was very dire, with daily bombings, sometimes, I mean, most of the times. And I was under enormous risk, but I continued to fulfill my duties. And I think it was a truly transformational experience. And finally, I swear, when I worked in Belgrade, I was representing the UN Secretary General in the Balkans. Every day was challenging because this is how I understood what Winston Churchill used to say, that this region, the Balkans, produces more history than it consumes. And actually, I think one of the challenges was that, you know, being so used to promote Romania, like so many decades, suddenly I had to promote 193 countries. And it was a challenge for me because, you know, I have in my blood, I think, this, and also, of course, in my brain.
Just the Romanian identity and become like a real global citizen where you have to put a front to every country and just love them as much as you love Romania in order to represent them, right?
Correct. But I want to mention maybe something that's important, how overcoming these challenges were for me, what it meant for me. I think that I made it with a few key, not weapons, instruments. And they are not really new and not really secret. A lot of hard work, a lot of courage, tenacity, positivism, and creativity. I think that these were actually, in general, the 5 main ingredients of my success.
And being resilient, I guess, as well. So it's like, if you don't get it once, you keep trying until you get the answer that you want in the different roles that you've passed on.
I mentioned tenacity. Yes, tenacity,
yeah.
Perseverance. Let's call it different.
So you were talking about as well as personal insecurity challenges. Do you think that the fact that you were the first woman was not only super important for your country, but also for yourself as a growing path? Do you think that posed different challenges that if you were a man?
Very good question. So you refer to being first woman in all the things that I've done, right? Not a specific one.
Yeah.
Okay. okay, I would take the example of the UN. We were like 13 female ambassadors out of 193. I was never more courted, and I never got more compliments. So I was spoiled by my colleagues, by my male colleagues. The thing is that, okay, you can be treated with courteousness, but you are taken seriously when you prove that you're a real pro. And I think that professionalism is actually, I think it's universal. It's a term that applies to all genders or sexes or what I'm gonna call it. Really, professionalism is the key to everything. So I think that it took me some time to convince people that I'm a pro. I'm not only a woman, maybe a charming one, but I'm a pro. Yeah. And that's the most important. That's the key.
And that's what the lasting thing, right?
The lasting thing, and the only treasure that nobody can steal from you, what you have here. But for having so much here, you have to learn a lot. I am truly the adept of lifelong learning. I just graduated an online course at Wharton College, recently. So I keep on. I'm 62 and I keep on grooving.
Yes, it's important. It's very important. So I would like to ask you as well, do you have any practical advice or tips for young leaders, like the ones that are here today, who are eager to enter the foreign ministries and to serve their countries? What can we do? How should we start? And what should we keep in mind, apart from the 5 characteristics you already mentioned?
Well, there are a few general things, first of all, that apply to all professions. If you want to be a diplomat or if you want to be a leader in any area. Solid professional knowledge, enormous amounts of work, courage, drive and desire to outdo yourself, not others. Okay? The only competition is with yourself, not with others. I don't know if it's skills or just the constant desire to improve yourself, to develop your abilities, to discover new ones. I think that they need to be ever braver, ever more innovative, ever more assertive. They need to be very perseverant, as I said. This is key to any career, and not to let others discourage them. Okay, never be discouraged by others. They are weaker than you. Okay, you must never give up your dreams and pursuing them. Never, at any cost. I tried it and it worked, and I kept walking. I wiped my tears because I also cried in the bathroom, secretly, and I evolved. The world will always need professionals, always. Okay, there are a lot of politicians and all sorts of maybe opportunists or imposters. The world goes on due to professionals. No one can take away that. So I think that a key message is for you to learn, and you'll get stronger. So you can make it in a world that gets tougher every day. I think that this would be the main things. Mm-hmm.
And I'll take just a second to just ask my peers here if they want to write something to you or just questions. Please feel free to do it, and I'll ask. And then, going on to the global stage, amid a pandemic, a world climate crisis, ever faster digital transformation, but also there is so much going on about gender equality, the future of work. these are terms that are all over the place and that are very important for us young people. So I can't help but asking you, what do you think that is the role of young people like ourselves in global politics today? We see Greta Thunberg, we see so many others, but for those like us that work in public offices or on a different stages, not as activists, what are the roles for us to play?
Well, I will put it in just a few words. You actually are our best allies and the best hopes, not only for the future, but also for the present. We count on you now. We don't count on you tomorrow, okay? We need your leadership, your participation, your engagement right across the globe. Because as you said, well, the world is still not in a good place. Now, the pandemic confiscated our lives and it's still torturing us. People are divided, hatred, inequality, violence, and xenophobia are on the rise. Climate change threatens, as you said, our planet and future generations. But we truly have to all, work together, believe in the power of solidarity, believe in the power of kindness, because too many times we forget to be kind, just kind, okay? We have to build bridges across divides.
Well. Yes, that's what it is.
Let's not start that discussion because you won't be able to stop me. We all count on you to be the architects of the present and the future, and the architects of the change, and also the torch bearers of all the things that we achieved, because still the humanity achieved a lot. And look at the SDGs and Agenda 2030. Just just go ahead and be our allies in applying everything. May I mention something about here at UNESCO? Because UNESCO and its member states, 193, are working with young people as proactive contributors and not just beneficiaries of the programs and diverse projects. And young people are highly engaged in our work in reducing inequalities and building sustainable societies and peaceful societies through the, for instance, Youth Space Initiative or the Youth Climate Action Network or the Preventing Violent Extremism Project, to name a few. So it's really interesting to maybe you go and check them out and get involved.
Well, yes, I hope we all do, because it's important. What we see at the moment, I would say, and the 2030 agenda, but also the youth agenda of the Youth UN Secretary General, not ambassador, but do you know her, Jayatma?
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oops, I lost you.
I lost your video.
Yes.
Are you here? Yeah.
No problem, because I was trying to take a picture, but my technical skills are not as elevated as my diplomatic ones.
I'm sure we can ask Daria to take one, and then she will share with all of us. But what I was saying is, we hear a lot that young people are the future, are the present, that we need to be engaged, that we need to take action. But also what we feel on this side is that we are always consultant, but we are never in the part of taking the decisions ourselves. And it would be important for institutions worldwide to include young people, not just as counselors, but as people that also have a voice and also have a means of decision. And
I couldn't agree more, but I would give you an example. For instance, the UN Secretary General appointed a UN Youth Envoy. Okay,
yes, exactly.
With the rank of Under Secretary General, for instance. Yes, I agree, this should be done by all the major organizations and institutions. And it will be, because they realize ever more how crucial your role is. Hey, you are the digital era heroes. We cannot work without you anymore. It's a fact.
Yes, and now just maybe one last question on a more personal level, and I think we never get the time to actually ask these questions, which is your life has been moving from one continent to another, right? From Romania to the US and then to Kosovo and then Iraq and all of those places. How is it to
New York?
Yeah. How is it to is it easy to keep a family among all of that? So they need to come with you, you need to they need also to have space for that in their lives. How is it to take the personal with the professional side of everything?
Short answer, no. No.
It's not easy.
A little bit more, a little bit longer version. This is actually a challenge that has to be taken into account by those who are attracted by diplomacy. In contrast with all those stupid stereotypes that diplomats are, just drinking champagne and going to receptions, this is a really hard profession because it also involves personal challenges. So most of the times, especially in the last 15 years, I was away from my husband. My kids, thank God, they became adults. And by the way, this week, I think I will become a grandmother.
That's
so
amazing.
It's a very special week. Yes, inshallah, as they say. I always had to juggle. And to tell you the truth, I was always asked about this balance between personal and professional life. Well, sorry, guys, there is no balance. You have to strive for it every day. Sometimes you put, on the scale, you put more on the professional side, and then, a little bit on the personal side. You always have to strive. But maybe I was also lucky because I managed to maintain a marriage of which will have 35 years this year, right? Well, don't ask me how many years of those 35 we spent together, but thank God I have a very wise hubby. I have 2 amazing kids. Maybe also because they were confronted with the hardships of induced by my career. Maybe they became even stronger. I mean, they made brilliant careers in London and New York, and they are amazing people. So there are negative aspects, but also positive aspects to this. But everything is so individual and so personal that you just have to be aware of the fact that you have this challenge there, and you have to learn by yourself with your own solutions to cope with it.
Okay, let's hope we all find our special key and also the special person that takes on the challenges with us and that are actually a team, because I believe that's only the way that it can work. So you were referring as well a little bit about UNESCO and the work that the organization is doing with young people and for young people. And I know that UNESCO has a very deep commitment for long life learning, right? And you were mentioning that at 60 plus you are taking a new degree. Do you think that is still relevant for young people, or ever more relevant, considering also this the future of work and how different it is from when you start your profession, as in we are always changing jobs, we are always traveling around and being global citizens. Do you think that our training and our teaching is increasingly important, or the skills that we get on as empathy, as responsibility, as commitment are also growing in size and taking a little bit of space of the academic side of it?
My dear, I think that having in view the world that we live in, I think that you won't have any chance without being lifelong learners. I mean, trust me, internet and Google will never know everything for you. You have your personal development is the most important, because unfortunately, I have to tell you, I'm a little bit sad that you don't inherit from us a better world. I think that you inherit from us a more complex world, maybe a tougher world, but very exciting one. But in order to cope with this kind of world, You'll have to be all the time up to date with everything that happens. Again, you don't find everything on Wikipedia and Google. Your treasury, your personal treasury counts the most. The personal development means lifelong learning, no other option. I'm deeply convinced of this.
Okay, but my question was, it's not just about academic, it's also about, for example, what kind a volunteer gives you, what kind of skills that intercultural learning gives you. That those kind of skills
absolutely
are massively important.
I was not referring only to academic stuff. No, just embrace whatever experience life brings you, and just dive deep into every opportunity, because every opportunity, even every challenge, every difficulty is supposed to teach you something. Every failure in your life has a very important role, because you learn more from the failures than from the successes. So yes, I think that everything that happens to you is meant to teach you something and to give you a good lesson to be used further on.
Thank you. So we have 5 minutes more. I would love to hear you. What can we young people, not to change the world, not to work with institutions, because we have said that was important already, but what can we do among ourselves?
Well, a very good point, Rita. I can see from the way you think why you have such a brilliant bio and activity. The key is not to, all the time aspire only to, top-notch things at top-notch levels. The most important thing is to be a leader in your local community. We start with that. You should be a leader in your family, because that's also a very important, and actually maybe the most important universe in your life. Remember that from an old lady, from a future grandmother. I mean, friends are amazing. I'm so happy to have friends, but family is everything. Okay, so don't turn your backs in your teenage years to your families. Just try to be ever better and to be leaders within them and within the local communities. So step by step, I think that you can, develop whatever skills and talents you have and whatever projects you have. It's very important to learn all the time, to explore all the time, to dream all the time, to innovate, to cooperate, to dare, to overcome your own fears. Because if you ask me about one major challenge in my life, well, my dear, it was not, I don't know, organizing the visit of my president to the Oval Office. No, it was overcoming my own fears. That's key. You have to work on that, especially now when the mental health became such a crucial issue. Don't neglect this, and you really have to overcome your fears. I know that this is specific to your age. You have a lot of question marks. I've been there, done that, but I'm absolutely sure, since you are here and you are leaders, you will find your own answers. Don't worry about that. Having questions at this age is meant to guide you on your path in life. So please overcome your fears and join us in solving our problems. Just as a final word, because I found it recently and I love it, and I think it applies perfectly to the youth. There was a Persian poet called Rumi, and I would like to paraphrase him at this end of the conversation. He used to say about youth that you are not a drop in the ocean, but you are the entire ocean in a drop.
Okay.
Ta-dam! Applauses and ovations.
Very nice.
Don't you love it? I think it applies to you so wonderfully, because you are an ocean, an enthusiasm and knowledge and skills and talents in a drop. because you're just some kids who try to find and who try to build a better future and a better world.
Thank you so much. I think we end up in a very, very nice note. Thank you, Ambassador, for the time here. I personally loved it. I'm sure all my colleagues loved it as well. And we hope to meet you in person, maybe in the next event. It would be amazing. So we'll keep on nagging Daria about it so we can make it happen.
She's a resilient one and very competent one, by the way. Thank you, Daria.
Yeah.
Thank
Indeed. Thank you so much. And I'll pass the word to you, Daria, to continue our program.
Thank you so much, Rita, and special thanks to Ambassador. It's been such a captivating session. And right now we will be moving slowly to our next discussion, which will take us to Europe, and we'll discuss and bring together youth activists who drive change in Europe. And our moderator will be Michal Kovac. He's Executive Director of European Democracy Youth Network. Michal is a social innovator and activist who founded and led numerous non-governmental organizations, especially supporting young leaders in Slovakia and abroad. He was a shadow minister of education at one of the parties where he worked closely with the former president of Slovakia. Prior to that, Michal was a member of the leadership team and head of communications at Swiss Slovakia, one of the world's largest reinsurance companies. He also founded the Center for North American Studies at the University of Economics in Bratislava, serving as the university's envoy for business academic cooperation. He holds a PhD and master's in international relations. Well, Michal, passing the floor to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Daria, so much for this kind introduction. Hello, everybody. First of all, I would just like to say that I'm really genuinely honored by this opportunity to moderate this panel. I know, like everybody says that, and I think everybody means that as well. And the youth leadership is something very, very special, and I admire your devotion and courage and everything positive that you do for your countries, and it will be a great time that hopefully that we can spend together and learning from each other in terms of your stories, your best practices. I think I don't need to tell you how important to you how important it is that the youth kind of assume leadership roles for both formal and informal, especially today when democracies are under pressure all over the globe, including Europe. And you are the source of inspiration that we, society, can do better. So let me just briefly introduce you. I will send your profiles. So I will just start with Vika Andruhovic from Belarus, who is a Belarusian human rights and political activist. She has an extensive experience of working in human rights organizations in Belarusian NGOs, promoting democracy, liberty, and justice. She worked at the platform for monitoring of the electoral process called Zuber, that helped victims of violence after, and she also helped victims of violence after August 2020 events, documented cases of torture and human rights violation, as well as actively participated in protest movement. She currently works for several Belarusian organizations in exile, which work to restore justice and establish democracy in the country, hold new fair elections, and release all unjustly imprisoned people. So hello, Vika. The other person who I would like to introduce is Marek Mach from Slovakia. He's a chairman of the Mladí Youth non-governmental organization, founded the Youth Against Fascism, and co-founded the social network for LGBT plus people called DUI, Rainbows, in Slovakia. Marek is winner of the Journalist Awards and SDGs Awards in the category Leader Under 30, laureate of the Forbes 30 Under 30, and a nominee for Roma Spirit Personality of the Year 2019. Hello, Marek.
Hello, thank you so much.
Our third panelist will be Sylvia Liskapka from Poland. Sylvia is the Vice President of the Polish Youth Climate Council, a graduate of the University of Southampton and King's College in London, where she studied marine biology with oceanography and hydrology, science and management. Currently, she is working on the quality of drinking water in Poland, although she's also interested in ecological justice and access of marginalized groups to drinking water. So hello, Sylvia. And last but far from least, Dunja Jovanovic from Serbia is the founder and general manager of the Association for Sustainable Initiatives, author and host of the FM podcast. And in the last 10 years, she has worked on the position of a digital editor at Harper's Bazaar magazine, an associate of Ella Serbia magazine, and editor-in-chief of Grazia Serbia magazine. So that was the hello, Dunja. These were the short introductions of our distinguished panelists, and we will also, according to the plan, we should have respondents, but I will introduce them after your introductions and after the first part of this session. Good. So so generally speaking, we should have like two parts in this panel, with two sets of questions that will be dedicated to all of you, so we can learn from you and we can share your experience and learn about your stories, and then we'll also jump to the respondents, as I said already. Good. So let me just start with the first question. As you are all actively engaged in civil society and activism, promoting and fighting for such different causes, what was your motivation to get involved in the first place, and how did your story unfolded? Why did you start to be active, and maybe what were the causes that you followed throughout your activism? So what was the personal thing that was so important for you to engage in public life? We all know it's far from easy. So maybe we can just start with Vika, and then kind of go around the table, if we can call it this way.
Yes, thank you very much, Michal, and thank you very much all the Community for Democracy's organizers for the opportunity to speak out on this amazing event, which actually empowers a lot of youth and makes our voices heard. For me, I would name that as the first reason is injustice, because right now it's probably the highest level of repression that Belarus ever faced in history, and we have a record number of political prisoners. Right now there are 691 recognized political prisoners, but definitely it's already higher than even 1,000, because a lot of families are even afraid to send data to human rights organization because it could worsen life of their nearest and dearest in jail. And again, like an enormous quantity of people who were tortured, who were also having people who actually died during the process in 2020. And it was not, let's say I'm in activism for longer than that, right? And actually this was always a case. So I actually have my good friend who was in prison for 5 years, whose youth was literally destroyed by the regime and everything that's going on in the country. The second reason I would name, which is very connected to this, the state in the country, is responsibility that we all take for what is going on, and it's very important to recognize it. And I would quote actually Sergei Tikhanovsky, who is political prisoner, who is in jail since May 2020, that I'll be in jail for as long as people will allow. And I think it's a very strong statement that shows that we are the ones to release them, and it's up to us. And definitely other reason is hope. I would say that, like a Belarusian society, Belarusian community, we went from the stage of being of like the highest level of inspiration and aspiration for democracy face in the fact that we could win to the level of, like deep depression that we are going on right now. And I think what still let us not to give up is hope that we are actually still together, and this amazing communities that we're still in. We all work, the majority of organizations were liquidated and we work from exile. Some people work from exile already for a year or for half a year. And we still don't give up. And I think like the sense of having these communities that still have hope, and the fact that we still have our, like colleagues and friends in prison is the main motivation here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The stories from Belarus are always very, very powerful, and especially here on the borders, I think we all know that something very similar could have happened and can even happen in our countries as well. So thank you for all your strength that you have, and definitely the hope is there, and you are not alone. and hopefully also thanks to this kind of fora, we can learn from you and get inspired from you, and hope you can also find other people who think similarly and who can maybe someday aid in all the efforts that you do in your country. Okay, so why don't we just go to Marek, who I introduced recently, to tell us a little bit more about his story, which is far from your story, Vika, but I can already maybe sense some unifying elements in what brings young people to activism.
Thank you, Michal. My story started back in 2016 when there was elections, parliamentary elections, during which a far-right political party got into Slovak parliament, mostly thanks to votes from young people. And because I was 16 years old at that time, I didn't want to just look on this situation, but I wanted to do something with it. And I decided to create a web page called Youth Against Fascism, which is now the background for a whole organization, Youth, as you mentioned. And our activities are mainly focused on social media platforms, where we try to engage young people and to share important information about the democracy and far-right extremism with them with the shortest possible way. So everyone who wants to can read it, and it takes as short time as possible. Right now, our organization has about 150,000 followers on all social media platforms, and this number is rising. And as you mentioned, one of our activities is also Duhy.sk, which is a social network for LGBT plus people. This was created 2 years ago when the situation with LGBT community in Slovakia was really bad. It's still really bad. And the idea is to create a platform where people from LGBT plus community can communicate with each other without needs to publicly talk about their sexuality. So everyone can join it anonymously and can talk there anonymously. And right now we have about 9,000 registered users who sent about 1 million messages. So these are our activities, and that's the reason why we are working on that, because background of all these activities is that situation in them was bad, mainly because of young people, or young people helped the situation to make it worse. Like, for example, the elections in 2016, when young people voted for this far-right party. And the idea is to make the situation better and work on that.
Thank you again for your leadership. I have Daria sending me questions that I will ask later on. So we'll do the turn around the table, the virtual table here. Thank you, Marek. And I think we'll come back to your experience in the second question that is very much kind of into what you are doing using online platforms and to reach out for your experience in this. And it's good to see people who see that the youth is sometimes not only the solution, but also sometimes the root cause for some problems, and their behaviors may be dangerous. So it's very good that we have a balanced view of what youth is capable of, and that we are addressing sometimes the problem that arises very soon and in a very constructive manner. So thank you, Marek, again. And coming to Sylvia, who has a completely different cause, but definitely not less important, as it involves all of us and the future on this lovely planet. So Sylvia, maybe if you could elaborate a little bit on your story. So what brought you to these topics?
Thank you very much. So my story started around 10 years ago. So that's going to be like a long story cut short. And it continues up to date, luckily, even in my professional job. So I started getting involved in different activities while I was still at uni. And at the beginning, it was mostly about getting experience, meeting people, and having something to put on my CV. But the more I got involved in different cases and in different projects, I kept meeting people who were really passionate about the stuff they were doing, people with different stories from different parts of the world, who were really motivated and who showed me that it's not about your CV, it's not about your experience, it's actually what you do for the community, and that the community and people matters. And I can see it in the work that I do right now. So I'm the deputy president of the Youth Climate Council, and we advise the Minister of Climate and Environment in Poland. And we do a lot of different projects. We have a team of 28 people who are very young, but also very engaged in the things that they do. They're really knowledgeable, which is very, I would say, kind of surprising, because you would think that young people, they're not supposed to know a lot about just transition, about energy and so on, but they are actually very passionate, and they read a lot, and they know a lot of stuff. And they are very motivated because they don't really get anything in return for the work they do. They do it for free. They don't really get a lot of recognition for the stuff they do, but they really are passionate about the things and about the planet, and they care not about just our country, just our local community, but about the planet as a whole. And it's really great to see that our work actually has an impact. So, for example, we're doing this project on climate education in Poland, which is a very basic, fundamental thing that we think should be implemented in Polish schools. And we can actually see the results already being implemented. So we had a few conversations with the minister and with the president of Poland, and we can actually see the changes in the law and in the way that the school curriculum is created starting from this year. So that's the biggest inspiration for me, to see the people who work with me, that they are actually bringing some change and changing the world and the local community and things that are happening around them. Thank you.
Michal, you have muted your microphone.
Sorry. So I just wanted to say how thankful I am for that you also kind of acknowledge that the motivation evolves in time, that maybe something that starts as a natural career path evolves in something that is really like cause driven, and I think this is also very important when thinking about youth leadership, to understand, comprehend, and acknowledge that there are many ways how people find their path towards activism, and all of them are wonderful because all of them bring new people and new energy into the public space that otherwise gets kind of dirty by all of those people who have no agent, that just hate. So thank you for this very very interesting experience as well, and coming to Dunya for her experience. So what motivated you? How did your story unfold?
Hi, well, first of all, thank you for a great introduction, and hello to all these wonderful people who are talking about these really great subjects on this conference. And secondly, thank you for recognizing me as a young person. I think that I'm the oldest one here, but still my public, let's say, are young people. So I think that's why I'm here. Like you said, I worked as a journalist for the past, let's say, 12 years, maybe even more. And a good part of which was in fashion magazines, where I worked as an editor of Harper's Bazaar and editor-in-chief of Grazia magazine. And this is where I actually started to research the whole fashion industry and how it works. And I started to being interested in its impact on the world we live in, both from ecological and ethical point of view. And by ethical, I mean labor rights within the textile industry, which was especially important for me because many big brands are producing how do you say, their clothes in my country. They have factories in Serbia or they outsource labor. And I'm unfortunately in my workplace at the time, fashion magazines were not places where I could write about it because magazines survive on advertisements, and many brands whose businesses I examined advertised in those magazines, and it was a conflict of interest of the sorts. So I started to think, what can I do to explore the subject even more? And then I started my own media, independent media. I started FFM podcast, which was started in the end of 2017, and it was a radio show. It still is a radio show. We are having a fourth season right now, and it's broadcasted on a local radio station, radioaparat.com, and it's also available on all streaming platforms, all major streaming platforms. I started it with my colleague Marija Radakovic, and throughout the show we examined the mentioned subject by talking with various regional experts from different fields: scientists, philosophers, trade union representatives, activists, technologists, and educated the audience about how the fashion industry operates and how it impacts the world around us. And especially, like I said, we talk about labor rights in the Serbia and in the region. And I was actually amazed how fast the popularity of the show grew. And I think it's because of the language. We talk in Serbian language, and it's similar to all the languages around my country, like Bosnia, Herzegovina, Montenegro, Croatia. So we have we have a public from all the region, and that's actually when we started to see the potential and started to develop the idea of both developing the independent media and then spreading the idea to some other platforms. So we developed the first Sustainability Fashion Day, which was held within the National Fashion Week. And thus the National Fashion Week in Serbia became the first fashion week in the Southeast Europe that dealt with the subject of sustainability. We held fashion shows, panels. We had roundtables at the Commerce of Serbia, engaged the politicians, civil sector, NGOs. So it was really a big deal. And we held 3 those events so far. And then happened the pandemic. So we were a little bit slowed down, but it's going to continue, hopefully soon. And I started also to develop the story of sustainability on social media. Firstly, like I said, because the conversation of about the negative effects of the industry actually did not exist in my country or in the region. I think it was really quiet, if it existed at all. And it all came down to shopping and trends. Although, like I said, the Serbia is one of the countries producing goods for big brands, and working conditions in these factories are far from good. and there is no system for regulating the disposal of textile waste and many other ecological problems. As you know, Serbia is really disputable when we talk about ecology. And why fashion? Why fashion and not some other industry? Because first of all, it makes a lot of money and it has a lot of potential to become more sustainable. For example, some industries cannot become sustainable at all, like oil industry, as we all know. But fashion can change in a sustainable way and actually become a trigger for a positive change. And unfortunately, that is still not happening. So I think we're only at the beginning, as Sylvia probably knows the best because she's in ecology. So we are only at the beginning when we talk about changing all the system to become more sustainable and more focused on ecology than on the economical growth.
Thank you for that. And Dunia, I mean, youth is a state of mind. So come on. So this is. But yes, and this is very interesting. I think again, one of the things that we need to acknowledge here is that probably talking about sustainability towards the big brands, it's not the thing that makes you the favorite the favorite person in the room. Also, sometimes talking about ecology is not always the thing that everybody around the table likes to be to be discussed, and so it always comes at a price. I think the biggest price people are paying are people in Belarus. That is with no dispute, but I think it's very important to kind of acknowledge that there are like everybody who is active in the public space is paying a price for that, but it's super important in the long run. And since we want to learn from each other, I hope that the master of the ceremony in the background called Daria will not punish me for this segue from the original question that she outlined. But I think that we could maybe, the second question was about the digital media and what role they play. And obviously, they do play a great role in all of your efforts. So maybe if I could slightly rephrase the question into two. So can you share one thing that you learned, you think you are doing in a good way, that kind of that you are think that you can promote as a case study, as a best, as something that the others can learn from in terms of social media engagement? So what is your secret, if I can rephrase it in this way? And one thing that you stopped to do, so kind of a learning that was a mistake that you did on social media. So I'm sorry for ruining the ceremony a little bit, but I mean, if you can be as practical as possible in terms of your personal experience with social media, I think we could all leverage that in our future efforts. So I don't know, Dunia, maybe you kind of you were the last one who talked about about how viral you went, basically by kind of reaching out to an audience who naturally talked your language, which was basically a great move. So maybe if you could share a little more of your secrets and why you think the social media are the key or are important in the mix of the media channels that we use.
Well, first of all, like I said, I have a background in journalism, so the way of the communication is something that is really interesting for me to explore. And like I said, when the podcast started to grow, immediately what I started to think was, okay, it's growing, but not everyone listens to podcasts. How can I, convey my message through some different mediums, and who can listen to me on those different mediums? For example, older people are watching TV. YouTube has its own public. Instagram and TikTok, those social media have different publics. So I started to think about how to accommodate the way of my messages, so that all those different audiences can catch on and listen to what I have to say, to interest them to join the conversation. So I actually started to go to some digital marketing courses, and then I started to set, to apply some of what I've learned. And then I made my communication strategy. I set goals and plans. And I think that's really important, to have the plan when you started to talk with people on social media, because you can easily follow what's going on and modify the way you talk and the messages in the accordance of what has the effect or what doesn't. And I think that social media is a really perfect tool for that, because in activism, you have to have engagement. Otherwise, it's not important to be there or say anything, because the impact is really important. And you can measure the impact of your messages on social media really easily. For me, there's no point in communication online or anywhere else, actually, if no one sees it or hears it. For me, if I do that and no one saw what I wrote or said, then I just lost time. I never wanted to work something just, to fill out a form. I really wanted to make the effect. And I think that I don't want to say most of the NGO sector, because in Serbia, at least, the NGO sector is the one who's dealing with social issues and spreading the awareness on social issues. But they're doing a lot just to fill the form and not to have the real, tangible impact. And some other thing that I wanted to add when I talk about NGOs is then again, the donors might be the problem as well, because most of the NGOs in Serbia are funded from, let's say, EU funds or USA funds mostly. And I don't think that people who are donating money are actually recognizing social media as an important tool for conversation, and they're still donating money for something like, conferences, events, physical events, or publication. And then that's the preferences still, I think. And so it seems to me that because of that, in Serbia or in Balkan region, many organizations that actually do great things are failing to have a visible presence online, and that's really a shame.
Thank you for that and very tangible feedback that we can also kind of tell to our donors who are also kind of in that pocket. So thank you for these lessons learned. Sylvia, so what are your experiences with digital media? Why do you think they are important, and maybe what's your secret formula, if you can say?
Thank you. So firstly, I would say that the Youth Climate Council wouldn't exist without social media and digital media, because we started a year ago when the pandemic hit the world. So all of our events were online and we weren't able to go to people. So this is a very powerful tool that enabled us to still operate and reach other people from around the Poland. And we actually have a lot of experience with social media thanks to that, and a lot of practical tips and skills. And we do things on climate change, and we talk a lot about depression and how young people get this climate change depression. So for us, what is really important when you create posts and when you use social media is the language you use. Because if you talk about the climate crisis, the thing is that a lot of people get very depressed. They feel that there's no future for them. So if you use a very strong language, then you don't really teach people about the solutions and about the future that we can create together. You just made them scared that the future is doomed and that we're not going to exist in a few years, right? So this is one of the one of the practical skills that we use, that we are really careful with the language that we use in our posts, but also we try to create a discussion. This is something that Tania already said in her speech, but the thing is that you can use social media to connect people from around the globe, not only in your country, and you can create this digital discussion where everybody can say a word, where their voices can be heard. And this is another powerful tool that you can use social media for. One thing that we are still learning is misinformation, because it's really easy to use social media to spread misinformation, especially if you do the educational stuff. So if you write posts about, I don't know, climate change, ozone layer, and so on, you have to be very careful with the data you use for that, because you can spread different information that are not really true, and they're gonna go on in the world, like other people will follow that.
Thank you for that. That's a very important aspect. And coming to Marek, I think he can follow up on that topic, but also on another topics that he's very experienced with. So, what were your learnings, and what is your secret formula, Marek?
Thank you. If possible, I would try to tell it as a story. As I mentioned before, it all begins back in 2016 as a website, which was, or where was articles about fascism, about its history, about its presence. And the problem was that while we were talking that the main group we are focused on are young people who vote for fascists or far-right political party. The problem was that, as we later realized, or only me, because in that time it was only a website, young people who are voting for far-right doesn't always read long articles on websites. So the idea was to change this idea to something better for them to understand and easier to read. And the solution was short messages on social media, which has a picture with short text, 1 or 2 sentences, where are mentioned all of the important data and facts we want to share with them. So this is what we started to do, not only in Youth Against Fascism project, but also in our other projects, like, for example, News for Young People on social media. And this looks like a good way how to talk to young people. Most of them spend a lot of their free time on social media, and social media are a great way how to stay in touch with them. So what we do and what we think that it's the best to do on social media is to share short messages which are interesting for everyone, and you don't have to spend a lot of time to read it, because a lot of content on social media is short, and people don't have to pay a lot of attention to it, and this is something similar. We also have our own social media or social network, Duhi.sk, for LGBT plus people. So we not only post content on other social platforms, but we created one. So we also see it from the other side as the administrator of social network, and this is this was something that that helped us to understand that share the short content and short messages is a really great way how to engage young people.
Thank you, super interesting. And coming to Vika, so how do you use social media in Belarus? What can you do? What can't you do? And And what are your kind of insights into the world of social media that the others could leverage?
I like the part, what can't you do in Belarus? Well, you can do a lot of things in Belarus, especially if you're inside of the country. So to be honest, I'm the worst example in terms of social media because I just have Facebook, that's all. Like the rest is something like I didn't explore and not planning. Yeah, I'm not really active on the social media. I mean, it's kind of my personal thing because I prefer real life, but the second thing, yeah, definitely very dangerous in Belarus to be public and to express your opinion because, like even for a comment on Facebook, whatever, on other social networks, on Instagram, you can actually have a sentence, and there are cases of people who are in prison for that, unfortunately. For even reposting, it's already counts, and like our security services, they monitor everything. So it's very, very hard to be public and use social network, like publicly express your opinion. But at the same time, I would say that social networks and this social networks boom that we face recent years, it's actually like the Belarusians, all Belarusians should be grateful for it, for what we have right now and for what has happened in August 2020, because definitely the authorities, the regimes, they block the internet, and the only way for people to know what is going on and to like have a real truth information was Telegram channels and other social networks that were at that time available via VPN. All the rest was completely blocked. And actually the majority of people, they even were it was actually protests not only against like elections that were stolen. Actually, the majority of people, they joined protests a few days after when they have seen the pictures of violence. So I mean, our election was stolen, like for each time. It was not a surprise, right? So but the level of violence and the fact that it became like very, very visible because of the development of the social media actually affected a lot. And yeah, so I mean, actually in 2010 there was also violent suppression of the protest, but nobody have seen it because people didn't have opportunity. And now we have also like a massive crackdown on independent media. A lot of organizations were liquidated. A lot of organizations had to flee the country and right now work abroad, and it's it's very hard to find a place to go through bureaucracy and also to find money and funding to work abroad and continue activities. Yeah, I mean, I would say from positive examples that I can share, my personal, that actually we developed a program, for example, for activists in Belarus inside of the country, so that each of them could become let's say a micromedia source, and so to share truths in Belarus, because it's a very hard situation, only because their media, independent media field is completely cleaned up, and still I would say Telegram is the main source of information, independent information. Unfortunately, state propaganda uses tools of social media also quite well, and I would say became more and more advanced too. Yeah, so I think it's very important for us, also to catch up and actually also to create those programs for people who are eager to work in this field and spread truth among Belarusians and uncover lots of facts, crimes, corruption, and things that are going on inside of the country. Yeah, about bad examples. Well, I mean, I didn't have me personally because I'm not active on social networks, but as I told you, that it's kind of dangerous if you are public. And even if you are living abroad, I mean, the majority of us has families inside of the country who could be threatened. So this is the main reason why, we're not going public usually. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Okay, so thank you everybody for sharing these very interesting insights and stories of yours. Now I would like to open the floor for the respondents, and let me start by very short introductions. So I would like to introduce. Yes, we have. So I would like to introduce Philippe, our Pipa Micholescu, sorry for my pronunciation, it's a very difficult name for me to pronounce, apologies for that, from Youth Lead from the United Kingdom, who is working in portfolio management at the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, working for the government of the United Kingdom. Then I would like to also introduce Tomas Martinaitis from Youth Lead from Lithuania, the deputy mayor at Akmenė district municipality in Lithuania. And just to demonstrate the power of social media, I would also like to congratulate to him on his newborn child, Vita. So congrats. Then I would like to also introduce Tinantin Oboladze from Youth Lead from Georgia, who is a legal counselor at the Department of the State Representation to the International Courts at the Ministry of Justice in Georgia. I would also like to introduce Barnabas Gador from Hungary, who is an international officer at the Momentum Tizen X and a student of Science Po, bachelor's in political science and government. And also Martina Krzysztofińska, from Youth Lead from Poland, who is a coordinator of the program Poland 3D debate on diplomacy and dialogue. Debate, diplomacy and dialogue at the UN Association Poland. So hello, fellow respondents. So maybe if you could offer your thoughts and your comments on what you just heard from our panelists. Maybe we can just start with Thomas for the sake of being a fresh father.
Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction. Yes, my name is Tomas Martinaitis, and first of all, I want to thank you for this opportunity to listen to all of your stories. Yeah, there's a pity about this quarantine that we cannot meet each other by life, you know, and because it will be also even more mind-blowing just to hear your stories live. But to share my own experience, yes, I want to say that last week for me also was very, very mind-blowing, not only because, as Michal already said, the born of my second daughter, but also that other news that I received last week that I want to share with you. So about my professional experiences, last week we got the news that my city where I where I'm living, were nominated among 5 pretenders to become a Lithuanian youth capital of 2023. And this is kind of the third baby for me because I worked a lot with this project, and I wanted to show for the whole Lithuania what we have achieved in the youth sector here in Akmenė, but also we managed to talk about the problems that are actual in all Lithuania for the youth that live in regions, and want to show some possibilities how to solve those issues. And how we managed to do it, we started with workshops with the youth organizations here in my region, just to talk with the young people, you know, what are the problems, what might be the solutions, what would be the action plans, how we may solve those problems. And by doing this, we applied for this Capital of Youth name to become. And yeah, this was very inspiring because our application was approved. Now the final stages are already left. But this is one of the examples when we want to talk about youth problems, we have to talk with the youth. With the youth, what they are feeling in their daily life, what challenge they're facing, and what can be done in order to solve them. The other great news that I want to share with you was also the news that I got only this morning, that I personally was also approved for the PhD studies in one of the Lithuanian universities of political sciences, and my team of my PhD studies would be the smart municipalities of Lithuania. And the idea of smart municipalities is that the cooperation of three different areas: the public government, the public administration, also community. The community is a third area, and how to engage with the community, how to hear them, how to solve their local issues together. And one of the success stories that I also wanted to share with you is the thing that I'm also doing in my daily life as a professional politician. Yeah, also using the social media tools that we also discussed. And I have this tradition, like every Tuesday in a dinner time, I'm making Facebook Live translation in order to present the people what is going on in the area where we are living, and also to give the possibility to ask the questions and on a daily things that is going on around the area. So I'm doing this thing already for I think 4 years. I have already 3 seasons and more than a few hundred shows that I already do. It's very short. It's only 10 minutes about the region, but this is a nice tradition that I'm doing, and it was recognized quite a lot by the others. And the thing that I want to share is it's very good for the politicians, for the other leaders, to have this kind of tradition, to do this routine that helps you to be recognized and gives that tool of communication for others to reach you like every day, and also try to be open-minded, or open in my ideas. And that's why I'm doing this Facebook Live, like expecting the live questions for the audience to do. And yeah, what other topics I want to share with you? In regard to what already other colleagues were presenting, I want to talk about what Marek had told about the situation in Slovakia. We also have now very big discussion in our parliament about human rights of minorities in Lithuania, and the thing that how this topics get on a political agenda is because the last parliament elections, the political party, the liberal political party, get on the parliament, that majority of the people were very young people, under 30 years age old. And this is the thing that the young people was not afraid to go to the politics. They created a party, get to the parliament, and start to talk about topics, about the issues that are very important in our society and our community. But however, the older politicians, older generations were afraid to talk about. So now we have quite a big discussion in Lithuania about sexual minorities, about human rights. But I think that the time came to talk about those topics. Otherwise, we won't be able to move as a society further. So that's a few examples that we are having now in Lithuania. And yeah, thank you once again for the opportunity to be a part of this wonderful group.
Thank you so much for this valuable input. I think it's everywhere. In some countries, it's maybe more kind of out there, and the others it's dormant. But I think that these topics are everywhere. So thank you, Thomas again, and sorry to Daria and Filipa for neglecting the order that I figured out was there written in the instructions. So Filipa, if you don't mind, and apologies for coming to you as to the second respondent. So, but if you could share some of your stories input, or just observations. Thank you so much.
No problem at all. It's Michu. I know it's a very difficult name to pronounce. So firstly, thank you to all the panelists for your insights. It's been really inspiring to hear your stories and how you're using media to spread your message and inspire change. I do find this topic about the role of media in promoting democracy really interesting, because I think you can see both how effective new forms of media have been in starting conversations about injustice, raising issues and driving change, and especially in the last year, as you know, we've perhaps all been online a bit more than previously. In the UK, there's consistently a view promoted by the mainstream media that youth don't care about politics, and I think that's a view that's increasingly difficult to defend. It's been really clear how positively these channels have been used to inspire change here. You know, voter participation is low, but youth political participation outside mainstream channels is very high. But there's also the other side to this, which I think we discussed, which is that, you know, it's so easy to fall into an echo chamber where you only listen to points of view that you agree with. And we're living in a time of increasing political polarization, and social media has a lot to answer for in this. I think even kind of anecdotally over the last year, I've had a lot of conversations with friends about how increasingly extreme the viewpoints of their family or friends have become, as they've only spent time online, have become trapped in rabbit holes of ever more dangerous viewpoints. Like in the UK, I think particularly relating to racism, sexism, homophobia. It was great to hear Marit talking about how he's using short sound bites in his projects to try and counter this with quick facts. I suppose if I can ask a question, it would be whether he thinks that this can have a positive impact on youth who've already become radicalized, because it seems that their views are more emotional than rational, and often kind of giving them facts doesn't help, and whether social media can counter this or it's something that needs to happen offline. And then we kind of talk about young people not participating as much in mainstream political channels. It's definitely true in the UK that young people don't vote, or don't vote in the same amount as older people. I think last election there were 47% of 18 to 24-year-olds who turned out, compared to 74% of over 65s. And as much as healthy civil society is indicative of healthy democracy, I think this is really an issue, and it's led to some decisions in the UK that young people don't agree with, but we're going to have to live with far longer than the older over 65s. But I also think it's in itself is contributing to this polarization, and there needs to be more done to bring young people into political decision making in the mainstream, to try and counter this polarization and the declining satisfaction that we're seeing with democracy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And this is an interesting question that you posed about when people actually become radicalized, when and how. But maybe if you can save all the questions for the end, so all the respondents get the opportunity to talk, and then we can kind of wrap up by.
Michal, we lost you for a moment. Michal, can you hear us? Well, we are experiencing some technical problems. Hello, Michal, you're back.
Can you hear me? Yes, apologies for that.
Perfect.
Okay, no, I was just saying that if you don't mind, let's save all the questions for the end, for the concluding kind of round from our panelists. Oh, but very, very, very important question, I guess. Tinatin, if you can jump in with your comments.
Greetings from Georgia, first of all. Today we are having a very inspiring and interesting talk over important topics such as motivation and causes for activism. It is particularly important as we all started from something. Some events in our life motivated us to keep pushing and to make impact, whether it affects a small portion of people or larger societies. The important has always been to have a positive influence to change the things we don't like or things that need improvement. In my experience, I always say that I was never afraid of being young, never tried to conform the cliches that being young and at the initial stage of the career should prevent me to be ambitious. I work as a legal counselor at state representation of my countries in international courts. I always wanted to be part of lawmaking process, practicing law on the highest level possible. For example, what the European Court of Human Rights decides in Georgian cases, it comes precedential for other Council of Europe countries as well. And I have this sense of having impact that motivates me every day. But now I want to focus on what we need to do on the regional level as community of promising young professionals. Firstly, accelerate our power to strengthen our region while preserving human rights
for all. The European region is diverse and all countries are at different level of development. However, this should not become the excuse of separating our region or leaving behind the countries suffering from international armed conflicts or pandemic. I see the panelists from Belarus. The country has suffered a lot after the elections. We encountered the very modern and up-to-date example of problems and threats to the European system of democracy. But also we have seen how passionate people were to change the reality. I see representatives from Slovakia, Poland, Hungary, and Lithuania, the countries which acceded to European Union in 2004, such an inspiration for the countries still working on the progress towards the EU, like Eastern Partnership countries, Georgia, Ukraine, and etc. And here is representative of Serbia, also country which is expected to become an EU member country in near future. I also want to shout out to my fellow youth lead from United Kingdom. The contribution of UK to strengthen democratic values in Europe is monumental. Whether the country is in supranational organizations such as the EU or not, UK is part of Council of Europe, having its contribution towards uniting around the European ideas and sharing the effort in the process of working on our regional problems. To sum up, my message is clear that the true unity of European countries is not only a great idea, but it's also an idea we should and we must keep working on. I encourage young people here to have an influence over this working process, and I hopefully we will be as united as we are here. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. I was searching for the unmute button. Finally found it. Okay, thank you very much. And so let's go to Barnabas and his comments, thoughts, observations.
All right. Can you hear me all right? Perfect. Thank you for having me, first of all. What really caught my ear during the discussion is the usage of digital media and Facebook, Instagram for campaigning and for reaching out to young people, hearing their voice. I think that's a great insight. First of all, I'm involved with the youth organization in Hungary, and we were one of the first to use TikTok in our country to get to know young people and to engage them in our conversation. And we've seen a great success in a really steadily growing form of communication. So we are really happy to see that, and we encourage everyone who really wants to speak the language of the youth to use the ways of communication of the youth. And I have bad news, that's no longer Facebook anymore, maybe Instagram. And connected to this is also the usage of digital tools to organize young people. When we started the whole youth organization, we had really few resources to our disposal. So we had to work our way up from free technologies and free tools, such as the Google infrastructure with the Drive and the Sheets. We started to organize from there and used our knowledge to build quite a substantial membership for the amount of young people interested in politics in our country. But in the last 2 years, and this is where I want to shift to the bigger picture in Hungary, I've seen a lot of change in the attitude of younger voters and younger citizens, especially regarding the topics of LGBTQ representation and rights and the climate catastrophe. I think young people have been the agent of change in these topics of really huge importance. So I'm really looking forward to see how this increased engagement will reflect in elections, because I cannot really see this movement and this new understanding of politics that a lot of young people present, turning into electoral reflections of these opinions. So I'm really hopeful that that us Hungarian young people can make our voice heard in the currently running primary elections and in the national elections that's going on next year. So what I would like to add that there is a really interesting democratic development in Hungary, and it's interesting to see how young people participate and form their opinions on that. The opposition is currently holding a primary election in Hungary, and we didn't expect to see this immense participation from younger people, but from what I see from my friends, my immediate circle, our members, and even the impression of our members, is the fact that young people are engaged, are going to vote, and they are affecting the policy and the voting outcomes. So I think that's a really good feedback that that communication works, but communication has to go two ways. So we have to find young people, and we have to interact them in a meaningful manner.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for your contribution. So I just received a word from Daria on the questions, but before we go to the questions, let me call out to Martina for her observations and her comments.
Thank you, and hello to you all once again. I'm really happy to be with you here and with our participants. And I'm particularly happy to hear your personal stories, because I think that is what resonates the most with especially young people, the young audience, who are the future of activism. And as far as social media and new tools of getting to young people is involved, I would like to mention not only social media as new platforms, but new platforms in general. In my activity at the United Nations Association Poland, where I coordinate program Poland 3D, debate, dialogue, diplomacy, I am proud to say that I successfully managed 2 projects which were based on this new platform idea. The first project is a currently open competition for NGOs. It's called Civil Society for Dialogue, and the main idea was to promote cultural diversity. And I personally think that the choice of the topic was very simple for me, because it's really undercovered topic in Poland. And we announced the competition in July. Now we observe really challenging situation on borders. So I think it really connects the dots. And I'm really happy to see that there are NGOs which are really engaged in the topic of cultural diversity. So it also links with the first question to our panelists: what was your driving force and what was your motivation to engage in activism? To me, it was just taking up a topic which is, in my opinion, undercovered. If you know any NGOs in Poland which could also take part in the competition, it is still open. We are waiting for our participants till the end of the month. And which is also great is that it's not only activism of United Nations Association Poland, but we joined forces with United Nations Global Compact Network Poland, and the biggest portal of NGOs in Poland, NGO PL. So that's the first way of finding new platforms and taking up new topics. The second one, which I would like to present to you, is The Art of Diplomacy, Diplomacy Through Art publication. And it also links with my personal story because during the day, I'm a lawyer and I work in IP, intellectual property law. So the branch of art and intellectual property is very close to my heart, and I find it really interesting. So my thought was how to connect it with diplomacy, which is the second thing I like the most and which interests me the most. And that's how the publication was made, and it was co-authored by my colleagues at the United Nations Association Poland and myself. And it occurred to be a huge success. In the first week of the publication, we had almost 200 downloads from our website, which is quite a success, I would say. And we got a really positive feedback from different groups of people saying that it's a new outtake for diplomacy, and it's something that encouraged them to just take a look on activism and diplomacy more, because it wasn't so official and so distant from them. So I would like to conclude with this short message that we should find as activists new platforms to get as many people as we can joining our causes. And I would also add, which is my youth lead motto, that education, empathy, and cooperation are 3 pillars of a successful civil society. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is great, and I know it's not my role here, but also maybe we can think together with Daria about the tools, how we can share these good examples and interesting websites and all the resources, among all the participants, because I think this is a precious asset. And even though we don't speak the languages of the others, so Google Chrome can do the magics for us, maybe. Okay, so in the program there is something like the moderator concludes, but I think the best conclusion is if you guys can respond to the questions that have arisen throughout the talks. So we have 3, if I'm not mistaken. So we have a question from the audience that will be asked by Oksana Drozdowska in the end. And help me, hello Oksana. So let me ask the question that was sent to me from Daria from the chat, and this is the one. Let me read it. So, what will be your advice to young people who want to become activists or start advocating for their cause? So, just a simple recommendation. Your idea. What would you advise? First, then there was a question about how and when do you think young people become radicalized? So what is the tipping point, and maybe where we should focus our activities in this regard? And the third one will be asked by Oksana, and then I would like to ask our fellow panelists just to take one question, or maybe 2 if they want to reflect on that question. And by that, I will call this panel concluded. Daria, is that fine with you?
Sounds perfect, Michał.
Wonderful. Okay, so Oksana, please go on.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Oksana Drozdowska from Eden, Ukraine. I want to say that now we have a very difficult time, and I want to ask to Mitchell and other participants, what is your source of inspiration? Who and what can inspire you to continue your work on promotion democracy, promotion human rights? What can inspire you? Because we all understand that now it's not an easy period, and due to different restriction measures, due to different aspects, I think it's very important to have own source of inspiration. It will be very interesting to hear it from all of you.
Okay, so maybe we can start with Dunia.
just to unmute myself. Well, that's a great question for me. My answer will be the answer to two questions. Like someone asked, the motivation, and the other thing is what to do when you want to be a youth activist. So, for me, the answer to both questions is to find a network of other activists who think similar like you. For me, they're the most inspiration. Like through my work with FFM podcast, the most valuable thing that I got is the new connections, the new friendships. I met a lot of new people who are excellent in doing what they do, who are spreading the message in the most positive way. And that kind of encouragement, when you're surrounded by people who think like you, they motivate you really, really much. And yeah, we live in a polarized world, but my that community that I created gave me strength to move forward, and gave me they ensured me that what I do is a good thing, you know, when they have my back, let's say that way. So that would be my answer in short.
Thank you, Marek.
Thank you. Firstly, I would say that I'm happy to be able to be activist and do what I can do. So that's the first thing. And secondly, it's also the feedback, not only from the followers, but also from our partners. When somebody came and say that he really appreciate what we do, and that's something nice. If you are trying to help the people, and then they came and say that they really liked your job. So that's what helps me to do what I do. And the question about what I would say to young activists is that also a question yes? Well, I would probably tell them only to do it, because often young people are talking about things they could do, but they won't do it. And the most important is to start. And when we start, then try to make it as good as possible and try to help as many people as possible.
There was a particular question on radicalization, and I think you are the one who deals with radicalization the most.
Yes. About the radicalization, from what we found out, it's really hard to radicalized young people. That's also the reason why we decided to start our project in news for young people called Správy mladí, because from what I've seen, young people started to talk about politics when they are about 12 or 13 years old on secondary school. With limited information from this area, mostly they are talking only about things they have heard somewhere. And if they have only limited information, as I said, it's really easy for them to get radicalized. So what we are trying to do is not only talk to radicalized, but also talk to really young people, even before they started to think about politics. We are trying to share with them as many informations about politics as possible. We created Instagram profile for them where they can found information from politics, from the society. And the idea is that well-informed society is less likely to vote radicalized political parties.
Thank you so much. Sylvia.
Thank you very much. So the advice I would give to young people is the advice that I'm trying to follow in my life as well. And it's quite simple. It's just to be fearless, but also to listen to others, because once you become the activist, there will be a lot of people trying to undermine you, to tell you that what you're saying is wrong and that you should go back to school and stop doing things that are not related to your grades or to the school. But be fearless, because that's really important. but also listen to others, because you're not the only person who's got the right. And this is actually the answer to the second question, how de-radicalization starts, because we don't really listen to others. We think that our truth is the only truth. And it's very important to talk to other people and to accept their opinion as well. And in terms of the person who motivates me the most, I think there are a few people who do that. Some of them are famous, some of them are less famous. But coming back to my first speech, I think that the people who mostly motivate me are the people I work with. When I see them being motivated and being very involved in the case, that makes me motivated as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the last word from Victoria.
Yes, thank you very much. I would agree with all the words that my colleagues already told, and I think the biggest motivation and the start comes from the community, and it's very important to find like-minded people who would support what you do, or you would support what they do, or you will create something together, you will inspire each other, you will motivate each other. And yeah, it's all come from the support of the community. I think again there will be a lot of like obstacles. Maybe it will be problematic in a lot of ways, and it's very important not to give up and keep the spirit. And again, this feeling of being united and being together, it's also very, very helpful. How to stop radicalization? It's a good question in a way that I think, especially in Belarus, it's kind of very common, like that's probably, this humanitarian crisis and a lot of violence, everything is actually, it's actually giving birth to a lot of anger. People are definitely very curious about what is going on, and it's very hard to keep it inside and very hard not to be emotional, right? And it's like all comes to different reaction of different people. And I just, again, I think it's a question of the community that you all need to accept the fact that, the change should be and must be even only peaceful, because it was violence could go only to another violence, and it's not a way. And it's also about educating other people. And spreading this world and being objective about what is going on, and I think also critical and accepting to criticism, and yeah, having just a common sense understanding of the situation. Just let's say it's very important to keep emotions aside sometimes while working in a field, especially with human rights, for example, in such countries, Belarus. So yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. So thank you to all, and a big shout out to Daria for organizing this great forum for us. So thank you for the opportunity to get to know you a little bit and your stories, and thank you for all the insights. Have a great day. Bye bye.
Well, thank you so much, Michal. Just a few words from me to close this. Thank you, Michal, for moderating this session on youth activists driving change in Europe. Special thanks also to EDEN, European Democracy Youth Network, for partnering for this discussion, as well as our wonderful speakers from 10 countries in Europe who presented examples of really different areas, from different areas of youth activism in Europe, and gave us inspiration to take actions. Well, this was the final session for today, but tomorrow we'll meet again for the day number 3 of the CoD Youth Forum. This will be at 2 p.m. Central European Time, and we will discuss youth contribution to strengthening democracy and peace in regions of Africa and MENA, with youth leads from Morocco, South Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, and the Gambia. As well, we will have a youth leads conversation with Secretary General of International IDEA, Dr. Kevin Casas Zamora. And to close our CoD Youth Forum, we will be joined by Foreign Minister of Romania, His Excellency Bogdan Aurescu. Thank you very much for everyone who joined us today, and have a nice day, afternoon, and evening from wherever you join. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.